Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Raynor. The World Championship summer, it's not actually over yet, Keith. We've got juniors coming up, but at least it feels like it's come to an end a little bit.
The grown-ups are done.
Take a deep breath. The grown-ups are done. The adults are done. And what a week in Cincinnati.
Really, I mean, it's hard to separate the two. Probably most of all for you having done back to back, but I mean it was like a continuation. So you start in Birmingham, you go to Cincinnati, and you get just really dramatic, important feeling Ultimate, but also this big cultural component of all these international teams coming together. It's got to be quite an experience.
It was a great time as always. Incredibly well organized by the whole crew led by Dale Wilker in Cincinnati. It's, totally justifies why WFDF decided to make sure this tournament went off without a hitch by hosting it with the very competent and organized group that ran this tournament 4 years ago. And, it was just everything so smooth. Only one 1 hour weather delay. And then there were some other rounds canceled because the fields were too wet, but it was, mostly smooth sailing. We had gorgeous weather on Friday and Saturday for the semis and finals. And the rainbow came out for the Color of Ultimate game. It couldn't have been more perfect.
You didn't find yourself glancing over at the wall-to-wall sports complex, just, wistfully missing the days of being compressed into a room to cheer for Incredible Ultimate?
It was a special thing, but it would be less special if it happened every time. So I'm glad that we had it the once and we can all remember what that was all about. But it was cool to watch the actual game played to full point totals in the finals at the stadium.
And it seemed like pretty good atmosphere too. So I think it seemed like people were enjoying themselves and engaged, especially during the women's final, which I'm sure we are going to dig into.
Well, let's not waste any time. I mean, let's just quickly run down what all happened here. 3 U.S. champions from the various club teams. Seattle Mixtape up first, beating Red Flag from Canada 15-6 in an absolute beatdown, 8 breaks to none. I mean, it was just not a close game at all. Then in the men's final, New York Pony beat Raleigh Ring of Fire 15-12 in a very, very well played game. Not a lot of turnovers. Ring had 8 total turnovers. Pony had 6. Only 3 O-line turns for Pony, and there were no turns in the game for the first 8 points. I think first turn came at 4-4. So. Then we had the conclusion, the capstone to an incredible week where Medellin Revolution from Colombia beat San Francisco Fury in their first time playing against each other, which is crazy. 14-13, universe point, game of runs, and truly one of the most amazing single points of Ultimate that you will ever see. I mean, if you haven't already watched it, you gotta go. It's on YouTube. Go watch the last point of this game. Even if you don't watch the rest of it, you have to watch Universe. I don't think I've ever seen a more exciting point. There were 6 turnovers and just some of the most jaw-dropping defensive plays you can believe, and a chance to have a walk-off layout score that just ticked off the hand of Elizabeth Mosquera. I mean, incredible stuff, full-on screaming in the production booth.
That moment in particular, I mean, I've rewatched it. I watched it with my wife who hadn't seen it, and that's that gasp moment. You're kind of you're holding your breath as the disc is in the air, and you're seeing Mosquera go on the run for it, and that is just a beautiful thing about sports and Ultimate. That moment when it's games on the line, it feels important. And you have a chance of seeing something amazing happen. And it turned out to be a very dramatic, exciting point, which is a fitting conclusion to a pretty exciting game that had a lot of different things to talk about in it. I mean, this game had a little bit of everything, and it's definitely going down as a classic, and somehow may have stolen the title of like the game of the summer.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think there were three games that really stood out, and all for slightly different reasons. Fury Revo, I mean, how can you ask for more than a universe point finish in a world championship game between two incredible teams with incredible defenses? It was a lot of turnovers in the game, 20 apiece, even on breaks, even on turns, ends up going by the flip. But the thing is, the way the game ended and some of the individual plays in that game, spectacular. That's number one. Number two was Pony Ring. Probably the cleanest game we saw at the highest level for the week. And then number three was Sockeye Mooncatchers, which also went to Universe, also had some incredible plays. And I don't know, felt similar to me to the Fury Revo game, but the stakes were higher for Fury Revo. So, I'll be curious to see how we kind of look back on things later on. But the fact that you have a non-American team winning the World Club Championships for the first time since 2006, and really 2006 is this anomaly. It was played in Australia right after the club season in the United States. Very few U.S. teams went because it's such a long trip, very expensive, and right at the end of the season. So throw it out, and there's never been a non-American team that's won this tournament. And so for Revo to finally do it in the way that they did it is just unbelievable.
And to go through I do, like you, share the amazement that somehow they've never played Fury, but to go through Fury, I mean, the most of all programs, maybe the most successful club program in Ultimate history anywhere, if not the most successful active program at the highest levels. To go through them to do it, like, just makes it all the more meaningful, and to do it on double game point, to do it in a comeback. Don't forget that they went down 3-0, right? For a second, it was kind of like, oh no,
it was yikes. It was yikes time out there.
I think I was sitting there and I go, not like this, Revo. Oh my gosh. But then they fought back.
The key was they had to get their defense on the field. That's the thing. Both of these teams' D lines were so good all weekend, and their O lines were, Revo was just so much stronger than a lot of the teams they played that it didn't really end up mattering. But like Fury, even against lesser opponents, was giving up breaks. Like Swampy Barg broke them a few times in a game that ultimately wasn't very close because Fury's D line was that good. But once Revo's D line got on the field, they were able to fight back, and they ended up taking the lead at halftime.
It's, you saw at points Revo struggling with execution. They play that fast-paced small ball offense, and sometimes that it leads to miscues. You're going too fast. You're throwing into tight windows. They were playing with a couple players who maybe haven't played the system as much, with some of their out of Colombian scene pickups. And I think at points you saw that cropping up and causing issues for them. They're against a tremendous defensive team, so you could see how that gave them problems. But Fury ended up making mistakes of their own. Both teams got a ton of blocks, so there was a lot of great defense to be had in this game. And Revo fights back. Right, they go down 3-0, and then they're taking half 8-4. Right after Carolyn Finney drops one of the many gorgeous Elizabeth Mosqueda pulls.
It was 8-6, not 8-4.
8-6, excuse me. And like, what a shocking moment! Like, of the many moments in this game, that was one of the most stunning. Carolyn Finney, one of the world's best handlers, dropping a pull
point
in the
blank,
World
dropped
Championship.
a pull. Brutal. Oh man, what a crazy game! What a crazy game! And we have to talk about the performance from Manuela Cardenas. 1 goal, 5 assists, 3 blocks, 2 turnovers, and that doesn't even count the block that got called back on a dangerous play call by Kayla Helton. And let's just hold the discussion
come back
of
to
dangerous plays and calls. We have some discussion to do, but immense performance from Manu, the best player on the field, willed her team to a win. I mean, I think without her, they do not win this game, and I don't even think it's a question.
She was just, it's a trope, but she was everywhere. Just like her defensive coverage was remarkable. And that's one of the things I think that's so joyful about watching Manu play is she plays with so much energy and hustle. And there are a lot of star players who carry a big load who might not try and do that. But man, she was just flying around the field, helping other people to try and get blocks. It just like really remarkable stuff and a lot of hard work on her part. And it paid off in the stat line and obviously in a gold medal. And
she made the key block on the Opie Skyball Huck on Universe. And who knows what would have happened if she doesn't get to that. But she like came from way out of position, not on her matchup, and made that block. I mean, just incredible performance. And, you know, a lot of the top Revo players were excellent. You know, as much as we talked about the fact that they had some key pickups in Lev Kowalczyk and Claire Chastain, Mish Phillips, you know, those players contributed, but the best players on the field were Manu, Valeria, Gina Cartagena. This is probably the three that I would name first. But, you know, this was very truly their team. This wasn't like some of the teams at this tournament, which were American ringer type teams, or in this case, international ringer. Of course, nice to have those players on the roster, but like Claire didn't even play down the stretch. So I think, you know, so impressive. Like Valeria and Manu have like, they're going to go down as one of the greatest sibling duos to ever play Ultimate. Like Valeria is incredible right now. Top 5 player in the world, probably.
I mean, we'll have to do that segment another time because who knows? They might be at the top of the list. I don't know. They might be already, and they're what 23 or something. Like it feels like we've been watching them forever because we've been watching them since they were teenagers. So now it's like you're like, wow, how are they still doing this? But they're just getting to the best part of their careers just now.
What is it? What do you think this means that they won? We've known about this team being a great program for a long time. They were a pre-tournament championship contender coming into 2018. They made it to the finals. They kind of got whooped by Riot. What does it mean that we've had an international team win this tournament with a full American slate? I mean, particularly in the women's division where there were literally 8 American teams.
Well, it's the culmination of years of work for Columbia, and particularly for this core group of women and also, you know, the coaching staff and those who've helped develop. You know, obviously got to give a ton of credit to Mauricio Moore. This has been a long time coming, and for a long time we've kind of had these other accolades that this group of players have earned. You know, they win the U.S. Open, and that's kind of their claim to fame. Now they're doing well in the PUL, and that's kind of their claim to fame. But it never quite reaches that. They don't get to play in the U.S. National Championships, which I think is ostensibly one of the most well-respected awards. So it's hard to get to the top of the mountain, and this really is their best chance to do it. And to achieve that is remarkable. But I actually think it happening in concert with what we've seen at the other tournaments this summer, both, you know, having another non-American team in semifinals in the form of Ellipsis, who is very competitive. I don't think anybody would question that.
Non-North American,
North American, excuse me. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, having that team be there and having the way that the week progressed show that other teams can compete. And then, you know, having the World Games also show that other countries are closer. I think that you need that to have the thrust of the narrative of like the rest of the world is catching up, because you could just say it's isolated to this group of Colombians. I mean, I still wonder about what's going to happen down the road for Colombian women's ultimate. Like, is there another crop coming up behind this group that we've watched grow together for so long? What's the sustainability? But those questions are what I want to talk about right now. That's more like, let's focus on this group and how well they've done. But I think you can see that the rest of the world, the top talent, is closing the gap with North American Ultimate. And I don't think there's anybody who is going to doubt that at this point, unless you're not paying attention.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Whether you want to look at the results from World Games, you want to look at Revo, you want to talk about, Mooncatchers was a really competitive team. Like, the fact that Ring and Pony made the final doesn't invalidate the fact that there were a lot of good international teams in Open as well. Ring and Pony are just incredibly stacked. Like, what odds would you take on that being the national championship final in October again? It's
the good number.
It's almost a favorite. It's almost a minus favorite. Because, who's going to beat them? Who's going to beat them? Who has the talent to beat either of those teams besides each other? I don't see it. So it's been quite the year. It's been quite the year. And if anything, you might think, well, international Ultimate would be set back more by the pandemic compared to the US. Think about Australia, the lockdowns in Australia and the inability to really even leave the country for how long? 18, 24 months. And they look better than ever. I don't think we've ever seen Australian Ultimate look this good. They looked fantastic at the World Games. And, their talent was more diluted, but obviously Ellipsis making a big run. And in the Open division, Sunder and Ellipsis were both solid. And then Lunchbox was one of the best mixed teams at the tournament.
Undoubtedly.
Very
they almost beat Mixtape. People will probably forget that. They were going to beat Mixtape. They were on the path. They were up late in that game, and Mixtape came back. But I think there's a perfectly cogent argument that Lunchbox was the second best team at that tournament in the mixed division.
Sure, them or Groot. And yeah, I think. Yeah, people are going to remember the beatdown that Mixtape delivered over Red Flag in the final, but it was, that semi was competitive, no question. Moving over to the Open division, Pony gets revenge on Ring after losing to Raleigh in the 2021 National Championship game. Also, there were similar games. Very clean. These are two of the best teams we've ever seen in the division. And this time, Pony, I think, you think about the changes to the rosters compared to the teams that we saw in October. Alan Laviolette, Anders Jungst, not in the lineup for Ring due to injury. And Pony, most notably, adds Jeff Babbitt. And Ring had zero answer for Jeff Babbitt.
Yeah.
How many times did he score with 5 yards of separation at the front cone? Athletically, he's just such an incredible player. And to have him on the offense, it's almost a waste to have him on defense because he doesn't get involved enough in the game. Having his involvement on the O-line, he was unstoppable. He had 5 goals, Keith.
He's a big boy.
He's a big boy.
No, he was out there making plays, and he got a chance to make himself felt on defense too, occasionally. But he was definitely a problem, and kind of points to a potential soft spot maybe in Ring's defense. They're kind of short on that big man on defense. I don't know if they can pull Henry Fisher to defense. I don't know if that's really necessarily his strength, but they are a team with a dogged group of handler defenders, and
nasty.
They don't necessarily have an answer for the elite downfield big man.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of teams have an answer for somebody with the size and strength and aerial ability of Jeff Babbitt, but I think Ring is maybe especially weak in that area. And I just, like I said, I don't think they had an answer. Like they tried different matchups and really nothing worked. And, ultimately, after a very clean start to the game, there weren't that many turnovers, but you can't in a game with this few number of turnovers, right? You think about edge stats, right? That weight turnovers based on the number of total turnovers in the game. You can't have your O-line center handler in Saul Yannick have 3 turnovers. He was just not good. And like he was kind of even on passes that were completed, he was kind of like floating them a little bit, like a little too much air bounce, a little too much pop. He's going to have to play a lot better in October if they want to beat this Pony team. Pony loses Jack Hatchett, which is not nothing. Like he was pretty important for their D-line and like drove some breaks for them. And theoretically, Anders is going to be back, but I thought he was already supposed to be back. So you wonder like, what's the timetable there? I think we're going to get another very competitive game, but you have to look at Pony as having the edge going forward, both in the AUDL. I know they're not the same teams, but we're going to see this matchup again, I would imagine. And then very likely to see these teams face off in the final in October.
They're definitely not the same teams. I mean, it helps to take like the 2 best players on the other team and put them on your roster, but no big deal. Don't forget that Pony's also losing Isaac Saul. I don't know how you left that out. No, congratulations to Isaac on a great career.
And he's done, right? This is his final.
He said it's going to be his last one, and he's going out on top.
Love it.
Can't argue with it. And with the win over his brother, just to top it off. But yeah, I mean, I think that while Babbitt was a problem, you also look at that great handler defensive group that we talked about, and Pony's handlers were able to deal with that pressure. They were able to get the disc to the break side. They were able to attack up the line. That to me probably was the biggest differentiator, was that Pony was able to deal with that. And we saw Ring pressed a little bit into sending the disc long, and Yannick absorbed a couple of those turnovers, but they were spread out in some ways. So I think that to me was the thing that separated them. I mean, Pony had such a great first half, particularly on offense. And if they're going to play offense like that, like what can you do? What are you going to do if Sam Little's playing that well and Jimmy Mickle and Sean Keegan are playing that well? I mean, it's going to be tough to do anything about it, to find a way to disrupt a group that can reset the disc, but also has incredible downfield targets.
I'm trying to look. I think there was only one point in this game on which a line turned it twice. The final point, Ring's O-line turned it over twice. Otherwise, it was only a turn here and there. And Pony had 0 turns in the first half. Zero. And they took an 8-6 halftime lead. They got the mini break at halftime. They come out on offense in the second half and they score. They had a chance to break to go up 10-6 on the following point. Didn't convert. And then they started to have some O-line turns. They got broken. Ring got back to 10-9, but Ring was never able to fully close the gap. Look, I mean, you said the handlers, like, let's be specific. Jimmy played great all week. Sean Keegan was unbelievable in this game. He had 3 goals, 3 assists. And like, I swear is still getting better even as he gets into his upper 30s.
He was playing college ultimate against me. Like, I don't know how the guy's playing his best ultimate now. It still boggles the mind. I mean, are these teams going to push us? I always wonder about competitive bowling, Charlie. I'm like, how is elite level bowling? How does it work? Because eventually people are just going to bowl 300 every time, right? Like sports just progress. Are these teams going to take us to the point where just nobody turns it anymore? Like, are we going to get to the point where if you have 2 turnovers, like you're going to lose?
I mean, it does feel like in the open division, like things have tracked that way. Like in good conditions with these elite teams, there's just not a lot of mistakes. I mean, there were literally just 2 turnovers total in the first half.
Imagine these 2 teams playing indoors.
Wall-to-wall soccer complex, 0 turnovers.
I mean,
win the flip.
We'll get to if things are going to track this way, like we're going to have to change the rules. We're going to have to give the defense some more tools, because we can't get to that point where everybody's bowling 300.
The meta's got to change, Keith. I mean, teams have got to figure out how to deal with the small ball attack. And I thought both teams played good defense in this game. I thought Ring played good defense, even though they only ended up getting, I think, just one break. And ultimately, it comes down to, how many opportunities you get. Like, they went 1 for 3. They have to give themselves more chances than that. So they got to figure out something. And that clearly starts with figuring out how they're going to deal with Babbitt. You just can't let him run rampant on you and get open side scores at the front cone. You just can't.
I actually kind of think, I do agree with you that they played pretty good defense throughout the game. But I think in a game where there are this few turnovers, where there's this few mistakes, maybe it sounds so harsh to say it in the context of a regular performance, but I just don't know if 1 for 3 is going to cut it.
Yeah.
You can't turn it over twice if you're only going to get 3 opportunities. Like that's just the way it is. Sometimes you see that in the UDL. You'll see like teams' break percentages are in the 50 to 70% range, and if your team's going to have 6 total turnovers or whatnot, you just can't have them all be on break opportunities. It is harsh to say, but you've got to be able to take advantage of the opportunities you create if you're only going to create a few.
Keith, how is it that we're at this point? We're like almost 30 minutes into the show, and we haven't taken a victory lap for both picking all 3 winners, both before the tournament and before semis. And we had people out here yelling at us about this and that and the other thing about our picks.
I meant to say that it's incredible that Revo won, despite the fact that all the Eurozone hosts and all the Deep Look hosts picked them. Like that is, you're really overcoming something at that point. We didn't account for the fact that we were hurting them in that way, and they still won.
I think they had the best roster at the tournament. They should have been considered the favorites.
Well, I mean, they had like 10 World Games players. Like what?
That's what I'm saying.
We said they were the favorites.
Do they win without Claire, Levka, and Mish?
I don't think so.
And to be clear, like, it's not like those players haven't played with Revo before.
Yeah, they're not just
total pickup situation.
No.
You don't think they would have won?
Well, I mean, you look at a game that literally came down to the last couple of possessions, but I think the biggest thing is the domino effect. I mean, having to play less experienced, less talented players in their place is what hurts you more than losing them. Like Levka, I think, was the most involved of the 3, although, Mish's job is to go play defense anyway. So like
Mish had 2 blocks, Levka had 2 goals and a block.
I think all
Claire
3
had
played
2 goals,
well.
an assist, and 3 turnovers.
It's just that you have to replace those players with players who are not of their caliber, who are probably going to be weak points to attack. Or
it's fair.
Conversely, you're over exerting your top end players, and you maybe don't get the incredible performances we got from Manu Valeria and Yina Cartena. So, I think that would probably be enough to cost them in a game that they barely won.
Mixtape just made the mixed final uninteresting and about 5 points in. Red Flag had absolutely 0 answers, just turnover after turnover after turnover, and just very little defensive pressure. Mixtape, I think, came in with what looked to me like the best roster here, and I think proved that they were the best team at the tournament. Khalif was very, very good, and they got great performances from a lot of their, players who kind of stepped into the team last year. And I'm talking more about the general tournament because the final wasn't competitive. But Kelly Johnson was very good. Billy Katz was good. Evan Klein is back, and he was very good. Chena was good, and Leaf was excellent. I think he said on Twitter that he didn't turn it over before the final, or maybe he had 1 turnover the entire tournament before the final. That's crazy. I don't know if that's true, but.
I think he said he did have 1 turn. I mean, I think part of it was that obviously this was a complete performance. If you're going to win like this, it took the whole team, but just like nobody could stop Leaf, Q, and Kelly Johnson. Like,
yep,
the 3 of them were completely dominant throughout the tournament, and there was really nobody who could do anything about it. Cherry also played pretty well in that final. It should be noted. But I think Leaf looks like he's at the literal top of his game. I mean, he looks like he's in tremendous shape after training for the World Games. Looks incredibly confident and composed. And I said in our Discord, I have never felt more confident that someone was going to win Player of the Year going into the club season than I do right now about Khalif El-Salam winning Player of the Year in the mixed division. I mean, obviously it's always tricky when you're picking one person out of hundreds who could compete for an award. So like I wouldn't put it at minus on the books or whatever. But I mean, I just don't see, there's nobody playing at that level right now, period, in the mixed division.
Well, I mean, look at the other teams of this tournament. I mean, I got to be honest, like, the quality of play in the mixed division at this tournament overall was not good. Like hybrid BFG, top 2 seeds, teams who were in, finals a year ago, they looked awful. Like they just did not look good. And I don't know whether that's because it's like early in the season or what the issue is, but we did not see the same BFG that we saw win in October. And it's the end of July. Teams are in many cases just getting their season going. And I think different teams take this particular tournament more or less seriously. But I agree with you, Keith. Like, who else is in the conversation right now after this weekend? I mean, you'd have to look to international teams to find answers.
Maybe. I mean, well, there are plenty of top quality mixed teams that weren't in the field. We'll see what,
of course,
Dragon Thrust and AMP have to offer coming up in the US Open. But, I agree with you that, beyond Mixtape and Lunchbox and Red Flag, I think the teams did not have their best weekend. We saw some good stuff from Noise and Hybrid at points, Groot as well. But, I don't think that it was necessarily the highest level play that we saw. So, I mean, I just feel like this Mixtape team looks stacked by comparison, and I'm curious to see how they will perform in the national circuit. But you got to feel good about their chances right now. That's for sure.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they were close last year. If they beat BFG, they win the final, and they lost by 1 in the semis, right, to BFG.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
they got a piece of it. They almost had the block. They got a piece of it, and it got saved.
That's right.
I remember that.
Crazy game. All right. Well, we got to talk about. Well, you know what? No, we're gonna take a break. We're gonna catch our breath. We're gonna come back, and we're gonna talk about the rules and the calls. We got to talk about it. Keith Raynor, Charlie Eisenhood, back with you in a moment.
We got to talk about our sponsor, Sunset Lake CBD. Now, they are a hemp farm located just outside of Burlington, Vermont. And for years, Sunset Lake produced milk for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. I could use some of that too. In 2019, they diversified and started growing hemp for CBD. Now, Sunset Lake believes that their farm-table approach is the best way for you to get responsibly produced, high-quality CBD that actually works. Sunset Lake CBD crafts gummies, topicals, oils, and more to help with stress, aches, and sleep. Now, Charlie, I was just at Summer League last night, and after a hard game in which we beat the only undefeated team, the only team that had beaten my team, to take first place in the league, where I got hand blocked by like the best player in the league, trying to throw a high release forehand.
No.
My worst game of the summer, but we still won in spite of me holding us back. But after that, my poor back, my knees, my feet, and even my pride were a little bit of hurt. So I needed a couple of Sunset Lake CBD gummies to try and take the edge off, lower the temperature a little bit for me, so to speak, and get me relaxed so I could get a good night's sleep. After I got home, popped a few gummies, and I felt a lot better after that. Really, the pride part the most. I mean, that was really, my back hurts, but having your worst game against the best team is tough to swallow. I'm very competitive and I hold myself to a high standard.
I haven't made any of the coffee yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you can just drop a few. There's a little eyedropper for your for the oil, so you can just drop a little bit in there, mix it in. and it goes down smooth. So helped me feel a lot better after a tough night in which I got a little stressed out, mostly on myself. I hold myself to a high standard. I don't turn it over a lot, so it's frustrating to do that. But I felt better after I got some Sunset Lake CBD gummies in me to help me feel good. You can check them out at sunsetlakecbd.com, and you can use our coupon code DEEPLOOK. Deep Look is the code to get you 20% off of all products. Sunset Lake CBD, farmer owned, Vermont grown.
Welcome back to Deep Look. Well, there's a big international tournament, and that means there's going to be some controversial calls, Keith. And there certainly were. We saw, for the first time that I can think of at a high-level tournament, usage of the dangerous play rule to nullify blocks where there was no contact created by the defender. We also saw some pick calls that a pick was called by the defense. The offensive player dropped the disc after the disc was thrown to them following the pick call. And both Jack Williams and Harper Garvey, who made these calls for Ring and Pony respectively, said that the pick call affected the play, caused them to play differently, and therefore the disc should go back. Harper made this call in the final. Jack made the call in the semifinal. Harper was booed mercilessly for the rest of the game for the call. And then we had these dangerous play calls, the ones that I saw on my field. Kira Kruzhnikova was playing for Putti, called one against a red flag male defender who poached a lane. And then we saw Kayla Helton, probably the most notable of these calls all weekend, call one on Manu Cardenas, who got an enormous layout block, kind of like at a slant angle as Kayla was coming back towards the disc on an undercut, and she called dangerous play. In all of the cases, the disc went back and stayed with the offense, even though there were turnovers on all four cases. So, Keith, I've been talking about this with folks on the ground in Cincinnati, but I haven't had a chance to talk with you about it yet at all. So we're going to have this conversation for the first time on the air. What are your thoughts on these calls? And if there's other calls that you want to bring up, please do. These are just the ones that I happen to see on one of the field that I was streaming.
Well, we'll start with the easier ones, which are the pick calls, which went the way that the rules say they should go, and it feels bad. And it makes you wonder if it should change the rules. But they're like, as much as the crowd wanted to boo Harper and people got into Jack in the comments or whatnot of the Ring game, it's the way that the rule's written. If the pick is called prior to the beginning of the throwing motion, then it doesn't matter if the player drops it. It doesn't matter if they're trying to catch it. As long as the play was affected, which in both cases it was their defender who called the pick, so there's no argument that it wasn't affected, then this is going to go back regardless of what happens on the ensuing catch. So I can't. I got to stop you already. You're oversimplifying the situation slightly. The rules in WFDF state that if players agree that the outcome of the play was not affected by the call, then it's the result of the play stands regardless of whatever the sort of overarching rule is. And the question that you have to ask yourself is whether Jack and Harper's drops, which were quite similar, Harper was coming across the end zone, kind of catching like a shallow inside break. Jack was coming straight on an under. In both cases, there was no defender around them. They were continuing the play, and then they dropped the disc point blank. The question is, was the play actually affected by the pick call? Was the outcome of the drop actually affected by the pick call? And that is where I don't think it's just a black and white obvious yes. It's not good enough that it was just a pick call. Well, so let's, if this was let's say that both players are caught in, we're going to keep the disc like in USAU rules, right? The defender in that situation would probably argue, I could have tried to make a play on that had I not been picked, right? I would have been in a position to make a play on that. So why does that go out the window because the disc was dropped? I mean, what was going to happen on the play didn't happen because there was a pick, and the pick occurred before the throw went up. So like the defenders can argue, we could have done something about that either way. Like I was going to impact the play in some way. Like I don't see how that's arguable.
Well, it's actually an interesting gray area now that we're sitting here talking about it. Is the hypothetical potential impact that the defender could have made on the play absent the pick enough for the offensive player to claim that play was affected when they just dropped it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know that that's actually specified in any way in the rules.
I don't know either, but I'll also say that I think in both cases, particularly, I know specifically in Jack's case because it was audible on the broadcast that he said he stopped trying to catch it because of the pick call. Like in his case, the only thing you can argue with is whether Jack is being honest or not. I
think in both cases,
I don't know if Harper made the same case or not, but
he said basically that like he heard the pick call early and that affected like how he went to try to go catch the disc.
You can see in the video him slow down briefly. Yeah. But it's hard to say whether that is because of the pick call or because he thought maybe he wasn't open, he was going to bail his cut, or he's making an additional move to try and get open. We can't really go in Harper's mind for that. I also don't think that necessarily the players trying to catch the disc is proves that they were not stopping play. Like that, as if the only way to prove that you are stopping play and are then affected by the pick is just let it hit the ground. In both cases, I think your just brain says like catch the disc, right? Like, especially if you're a North American player where that's a turnover if you don't. I think that programming occurring doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't stopping play at that point. In neither case would the catch have stood had they made the catch. Like at best, the disc was going back, right?
I already
it feels bad because you just watch.
I don't like the North American pick rule. Yeah, I don't like the North American pick rule that much, but this is so much worse. The fact that the offense gets to keep the disc when they caused an infraction and then turned it over is total BS. It's total BS, and I can understand why the whole crowd is booing.
Yes,
I can understand. Come on. What do we do? That's not how it should be resolved. You dropped it. You picked the guy and then you dropped it. Like that's Harper started walking the other way, right? Like he looks like he turned it over. Like his brain says, "Okay, I'm on defense now." That's what's whack. Because like, of course, he's predominantly playing under USAU North American rules where that is a turnover, and there is no recourse. But if the recourse is, I slowed down my well, too bad. You caused the infraction. It wasn't the defender that caused the infraction. But the whole pick rule is busted already. But I hate that.
You're kind of ready for picks to just be removed. I mean, I think every time we talk about this, the more you're like, I'm done with picks being illegal.
I think that
intentional picks should be illegal.
Yes, you shouldn't be able to set screens,
right,
and like blow people's doors open like with a big screen, blindside screen. Shouldn't be able to do that. But if you set up in the stack in such a way that you are, have to run around somebody because you like set up in a way where if the person goes break side and you're blocked by that, like that's your own fault. I just think that we can do better with the pick rules, and like defenses need to adjust to being able to switch more easily and be in better positions in general. And like, if you get tangled up with somebody like that, you shouldn't just get to be like, oh no, stop. Like I got tangled up by my own teammate. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. I think this is in general a problem.
What's funny is that in this case, sorry to interrupt, in this case, that would actually be beneficial for the defenses because it would have been a turnover in both cases.
Right. I mean, there's no way around that it feels bad. It doesn't. It's something that feels off, right? You're watching the offense cause a problem, then make an additional mistake, a turnover, and it receive no penalty for that. So there's no way around that feels wrong. I think one of the challenges that is inherent to Club Ultimate and basically everything but Semi-Pro Ultimate is that basically the only penalty you can enforce is turnover, which is a hefty penalty for anything. Hefty. Like, so in, the Semi-Pro leagues, they're able to do yardage penalties. So that gives you something between doing a turnover and nothing, which Ultimate has a problem with. I do think that maybe like the stall count could be an area which you can mess with. Like, if you cause a pick, the stall count goes up 3 seconds or whatever, or it goes to 8 at max.
I mean, it does a little bit. I mean, sort of. That already exists, but it's +1, not +3.
Right. Like maybe there's some other lever to pull here besides just like nothing happens, because the offense already has so many advantages. And in most cases, the offense can cause mistakes, but can cause violations and get the advantage, including offensive fouls, right? Like, you can foul somebody and still gain the advantage of it, basically. Like, I don't know. I guess all stoppages in theory kind of are advantageous to defense, so maybe that's something to it. But point is, this was not good. But it was, to me, by rule. Like, the way that it happened was how it was supposed to happen, and I wouldn't say that Jack or I don't feel like Jack or Harper were trying to take advantage of the rules and were cheating in these situations.
It was by the book. Okay, but we got to talk about the dangerous plays, because remember, Keith, when we were talking about changes to the dangerous play rules, and then when they came out with the rules about potential challenges with the rule, we basically described the scenarios that have played out. Mm-hmm. And this is the highest profile time that we've seen this. So here's the rule from the WFDF rulebook. Actions demonstrating reckless disregard for the safety of fellow players or posing significant risk of injury to fellow players or other dangerously aggressive behaviors are considered dangerous play and must be treated as a foul regardless of whether or when contact occurs. This rule is not superseded by any other foul rule. If the dangerous play call is accepted, this must be treated as the most relevant foul from Section 17. In both of these cases, the plays were not accepted. They were contested and went back. So we have kind of two different plays to talk about, Keith. Kira Kruzhnikova's call, she's actually already gone on social media and said that she blew the call, basically. That she shouldn't have called it, but that she, after getting like blown up multiple times during the Western Ultimate League season, which is totally true, was a little jumpy at seeing somebody come across the kind of the blindside lane and pick off a pass that was intended for her. Ultimately, when you look back at the video, you couldn't call that a dangerous play, given that there was really no risk of contact in that situation. She just got beat to the spot. But then we have the Kayla call against Manu. Do you want to talk more about the Kira play or not?
I'll come back to it after we talk about Kayla and Manu, because the thing I'm going to say is relevant to both.
So Manu makes an enormous layout D kind of across the face of the play, coming back towards Kayla, who is coming on an under, and Kayla kind of pulls up and doesn't go into the space. Had she gone into the space, there would have been a pretty significant collision. And so she calls dangerous play. What do you think, Keith? Is that a dangerous play or is that a clean block?
Well, can it be both? Probably not. You have these two players who are going in different directions, right? So both are looking back at the disc, and Manu is moving at an angle, but towards the front deep cone, and Kayla's coming back under because the throw was short. So she's coming from the deeper space back towards the disc. And both players are looking at the disc, though clearly I think Kayla has a better line on seeing Manu, who's in her field of vision. So, in that situation, I mean, I think it's clear from the way that Manu moves that she was attempting to avoid contact. But Kayla made the decision to bail out, and we originally when we originally talked about this rule change, you and I had a pretty strong disagreement on this point, which was, how can you have no contact result in a foul and like we're going to leave this big gray area that's going to be subjectively put to players' perception of hypothetical events. And this is the challenge that we face. I still agree that players should not have to be in danger and should not have to accept dangerous contact in order to claim that they were disadvantageously affected by it. I don't think we should put players in that position. So I maintain that there's like room for this rule, but our D3 editor, Michael Ball, had some thoughts about the Kira play that I think are applicable to both that he tweeted. He said, that dangerous play call from Kira is a perfect example of a flaw in the rule. Gagan Chatha, the defender in that situation, made sure to take a safe line that avoided any contact. You can see his intent and focus on safety. I think that's somewhat true in Manu's case as well. But if a player feels endangered, who are you to tell them that they weren't? He goes on to say that Kira had every right to feel endangered, but it seems wrong to punish the player. At the end of the day, you usually just have to respect the call. So safety should supersede all else, but it's a rule with tons of gray area for subjectivity and emotion. And that's going to lead to iffy applications. And I think that's what we ended up with. And in order to make room for flexibility and adaptability to these situations, you need to insert subjectivity, and that's going to lead to some situations where players do not have the same perspective and where fans may not share their perspective. I don't think that it was a dangerous play, but I think it's also clear that Kayla felt like she could not try and make a play on the disc safely. I think what many have argued is that she didn't have a right to make a play on that disc, that Manu beat her to the spot. And so why should the offensive player be able to say, I wanted that space and you denied it from me?
I wasn't there first.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was dangerous. To me, that should have been the outcome of the call. But Mike's right. I mean, it's hard to tell a player you didn't feel endangered. Then you get into a discussion about, well, was your judgment on the situation correct? Was there an actual danger situation or wasn't there? And like, how do you come to a conclusion on that? That doesn't involve just saying, we disagree, let's send it back.
I have an answer. Observers, referees, third-party decision makers who are looking objectively at the situation and making an informed decision about it. I'm serious. Like at the highest levels of the game, it doesn't make sense to have players making subjective decisions like this anymore. It just doesn't. I mean, I felt this way for a long time. Game advisors have been a nice sort of like intermediary step, but when game advisors are being directly overruled by players and game advisors saying, this is what I saw, and the player says, well, that's not what I saw, so send it back. I mean, what are we doing here? Like, there's a reason that we've established an observer system, and then, you're seeing the AUDL uses referees, whatever. You need people who are there to adjudicate a situation to make it more fair. That red flag play, I honestly don't know what would have happened in the Kayla Manu play. It is a gray area. Maybe it does go back. Maybe it gets sent back by an observer. But Manu made a very clean block. And yeah, Kayla couldn't go into the space further, but I actually don't think I don't think it was a situation where Kayla was coming underneath and was going to make the play and then stopped. I think Kayla was expecting to have the disc reach her hands, and Manu got a crazy D, and then she was like, whoa, kind of startled by it, and said, well, wait a minute, that I was going to get it. I don't feel like that qualifies as a dangerous play, but I will acknowledge that it's borderline based on this rule. Now, I don't like the rule. I never liked the rule in the first place because I think it leaves too much room for interpretation that we're seeing play out in a situation like this. This is an international final. And it's going back when there's zero contact. That to me is crazy. I understand wanting to keep players safe. I am one of the biggest proponents of that. But I also think that you have to have some way of like delineating like what is and what isn't a foul or a dangerous play. And when someone makes a perfectly clean block in which they contort their body in such a way that they don't make contact, to say that the offensive player, had they continued, there would have been hypothetical contact, to me doesn't meet the bar for like what qualifies as something that would be considered a foul. And that's why I think we need to have observers make a call like that, because how else do you do it? Like in a USAU game, that Kruzhnikova call gets immediately overruled. Immediately. And like, that's the correct outcome. And it should be turnover to red flag. So I don't know, like having monster Ds get taken away by offensive players feeling like they could have had a play, but there might have been contact, is not how I want the sport to develop. I think that's bad for like the watchability of the game, and is just way too gray area. I don't know how you solve the problem though.
That's the part that I don't really know. You know, that and you and I maybe in our subscriber bonus segment we'll talk more about GAs in general versus observers or other third party officials, because I think that conversation is still hot, although I don't think it has evolved much from where it was like 4 years ago when we were having these same discussions. But this specific instance, you know, is difficult. Like, you know, I think this play is close enough to merit discussion, but I think that there's like an almost a stigma about withdrawing your calls or like changing your mind. This was something that I was talking to Ravi Vasudevan about, the Eurozone host. And I was saying like, look, in North American Ultimate, basically nobody ever changes their mind. I mean, basically in American culture, nobody changes their mind about anything. In fact, you double down. Like that's the standard. I don't know if you've been online lately, but if somebody tells you you're wrong, you double down, even when presented with evidence to the contrary. But I don't think it happens very much in Ultimate. I don't think a lot of players have a discussion and a player presents an alternative viewpoint and the other player goes, you know, I think I believe you, or I think you're right. Like I retract my call. It happens, but pretty rarely. And Ravi implied that in Europe, that actually is a lot more common than in his experience in North American Ultimate. So, you know, maybe players would benefit from being a little more open-minded in their conversations with other players. And when another player's like, I really don't agree with that perspective, like, here's what I saw, you know, someone can be a little more like, okay, I think I see where you're coming from. And like, I'm going to retract the call, and we can like destigmatize that. But like, you know, obviously there's a point in which let's say Kayla was 10 yards away. Like, everybody would say that call is ridiculous, but there's nothing you could do about it. If Kayla said dangerous play, like, I'm contesting it, we're sending it back. It goes back, right? She could have been 25 yards away. Sure. There's nothing you can do about it without a third party. You know, I guess there's somebody said there's some like final arbitration where GAs can remove a player for a game for cheating or something, but I don't know. You know, I guess all the rules if somebody wanted to break Ultimate, they could. Nobody could really stop you.
That's right.
So we can't, I guess we can't worry about that too much. But I've also heard the argument like that Manu did not endeavor to make herself aware of where Kayla was. That there's no evidence that Manu was aware of Kayla's positioning necessarily, kind of just guessing.
I'm very skeptical of that argument.
I'm skeptical too. I don't know if I see like a visual confirmation of her like looking over her shoulder or whatnot. And I could see her kind of like turning away at the last moment, being okay, I think Kayla's around me somewhere, so I'm going to try and like avoid that. But I mean, I think that takes you got to reach, I think, to get there when it feels like Manu's trying to avoid contact.
There was no contact. Just to be clear, there was
although
no contact.
I stand by that. I don't think the bar for calling a dangerous play should be I need to be in danger, like I need to be physically hit.
I must put myself into the damage zone.
Right.
I understand. But the problem is that it opens the door for this.
Yeah, I agree. It does. It's like, you know, I don't need to get shot to charge somebody for shooting at me. You know what I mean? Like,
well, that's not a particularly good metaphor. I think that the challenge is like anything else, where you have this like subjectivity about the way that players experience a certain play. And it's not that either player is necessarily wrong, but there is, in most cases, an objectively correct outcome. And that's why we use observers. So anyway, I know people are going to want to weigh in on this topic. So email us at deeplook@ultiworld.com. Hit us up on Twitter at deeplookpod. Hit us up in the Discord, because this is just going to be, I think we're going to have people on both sides of the coin on this one.
I still wonder.
I think it's a challenging situation to figure out how to deal with.
I still wonder, not that this really has any bearing on the actual play itself, but the online reaction to it. If it were Dylan Freechild getting that block, would people be so up in arms? I have to wonder. I mean, Manu is one of the most popular players in the world, and in particular, I think there's a lot of divide about North American players who are more likely to be pro observer or pro third party officiation, like siding on this. Like, I've seen a lot of takes online that are pretty strong. And I wonder if the international ultimate community would be as strong-willed about it if it were a player who was not quite so popular making this incredible block. But that's just me.
I don't know.
They really don't like Dylan Freechild,
Keith. Maybe there's some effect there, Keith, but like, I don't care what player you put in that spot. It's like a crazy layout D. And when there's no contact and then it's getting called back, people are going to be having feelings about that.
And it is extra bad. And this is true of the Garvey and Williams plays as well. It's extra bad for spectators. I mean, you don't get all of the context necessarily that we are getting after the fact and online. Like, if you were there watching that game, like, those calls seem totally out of whack.
Well, what they need to do is they need to patch the observer audio into the PA system.
So you want like football style, like here's the call, blah, blah, blah.
If you're in the stadium, you should be able to listen in the same way we listen in on the broadcasts. I think. Because it's like such a key part of the resolution of calls in the game.
It is kind of interesting now that I think about it. Like, having played basketball for so long, that fouls are not recorded. Like, I mean, it would not take a ton of additional complexity to like report the numbers the way basketball refs do, or what the violation was.
Oh, that's at a minimum. But I think you should be able to listen in on the discussion. Like, a lot of times, like, if there's a big controversial situation let's say in a football game, you know, they go and they do a replay review, they go in the hood, they come out, the ref turns on the mic and then explains the reasoning for the call in many cases. So at least you understand what's going on. I don't know. Very interesting. Very interesting. Keith, you know, this is tournaments coming after World Games. Definitely different events. But an international Ultimate Summer feels great to have it back, by the way. And what a spectacle we've had for the last 2 weeks of just being able to watch, or 3 weeks now, to be able to just watch all these high level games, many games a day. So
let's keep it going. Why doesn't everybody at US Open agree to play super well, and everybody online agree to be really engaged?
Sounds like a good time. What were your thoughts overall on WCC?
It went better than I thought. I kind of thought we were going to have to take a pretty sizable step back from the quality of play of World Games, and I thought, we did. Like, it's only reasonable. Like, it's almost impossible that it would be as good as World Games, but I still thought we got a lot of exciting Ultimate. I think that it was, not a lot of the games were just like blowouts, foregone conclusions, blah, blah, blah. We got some pretty exciting Ultimate along the way, and it made for a good journey, because that's I think sometimes can hamper this tournament, is that there's such a wide spread of the quality of play, but it was those teams that were at the borders of tiers that helped keep it interesting. Teams able to compete with teams in the tier above them, or to blend those tiers together more. And that, I think, kept it interesting. I mean, even in the mixed division where we criticize some of the quality of play, you can see, this team took this team to double game point. This team lost to this team by 2. And you can kind of tie the things together that way.
Yeah, it was cool to see all the different styles and the different, ways teams came together and
new players to be excited about,
and players we have never really talked about before, players we haven't seen in a long time. We haven't had a major adult club tournament on the international level since 2018 Worlds, right? We had U24s in 2019. I guess we had PAUK, but that's a smaller slice.
That's not a major.
Yeah. It's not the same. So it's been a while.
World Masters.
Sorry, World Masters.
I know that. I know the Masters players. When we get a couple emails every year, when are you guys going to talk about Masters? This is it.
Look, I'm Masters eligible. I'd love to go play Masters Worlds, Masters Nationals. I'm sorry.
Also, that's it. Masters players, if you're listening, that's where you failed. You should have recruited us. If we were playing at the tournaments, you might have got some coverage.
Yeah, that's right. Who's got the spots for us? Yeah. Well, anyway, fascinating week. Grueling week. I am still tired and got to turn right around and do US Open. So,
one of the best international tournaments there is, right? Is it still ICC? Are we still calling it that?
I don't know. I hope they don't keep calling it that. In a normal year, I hope that we continue to see this, US Open can hopefully be a tournament that brings teams like Revo to the US to play the top US teams, because I think it's great fun to watch them play. Was it 2018, right before Worlds, right? When Revo came and played Molly Brown in the final? Those were some of the best games of the year. If
it wasn't for World Games, do you think USA Ultimate would have tried to move this tournament to be before Worlds? Or they would have worked with WFDF to try and have this tournament prior to Worlds? I could easily have seen teams prepping for WUCC by going to US Open.
Yeah, it would make sense. But they've already locked these dates with the complex.
It's hard with this particular year because so much stuff had to get rescheduled, and we have this packed calendar. So I think in an average year like this is when US Open should be good, is when you have teams prepping for Worlds. This is the year, and to have to lose out on that because of everything with the pandemic, that kind of stinks. I'm maybe a little surprised not a single team stayed around, but maybe there wasn't even an opportunity to figure out the logistics of that.
This is also a long time, and
it is.
It's not going to exactly feel that meaningful after playing Worlds.
Exactly.
Everybody's going to be tired playing 7 days. I don't know. What's the upside? You're not even playing the best US teams. You just played them.
not if you're one of the mid-tier teams, yeah.
Well, Keith, you had said something to me off the air before we started recording about World Games and how we should have a tournament like that every year.
We should. I mean, I've kind of been banging the drum a little bit and sort of kidding about the US should host our own internal World Games style event so that we can continue to prep for World Games and have an extended tryout process via the best 120 players getting together and forming tournament teams. But why can't we just play World Games style Ultimate 14, seven of each gender matching player? Why can't we just do that? It's exciting and awesome, and it's a good format, I think. Bring over the polling rule and the gender ratio rules, and let's get to cracking. This could be a fun. It doesn't have to be a whole series or a whole season, but it could be a nice change of pace somewhere in the calendar that we could squeeze in to have a fun tournament like that with top level players.
Here's what you do. Every either city or state scores points based on the performance of the teams that they send to club nationals, or you could use the entire postseason if you wanted. And the top X performing cities / states get bids to this tournament, and then they send a team, and you have a $15,000 prize for the winner.
Here's another way I could actually see this happening. Semi-pro leagues. They partner together.
Yeah, they go mixed.
And they do mixed 7-on-7. You pair
or they do a
teams.
Mixed cup.
You pair teams like regionally or statewide if you need to, like for teams that aren't quite in the same city. Like obviously the numbers aren't quite going to fit. I don't want any real combo AUDL teams, like 2 AUDL teams and 1 WUL team or something like that. But there's some obvious natural fits where they're in the same city. It's an easy port. And then you get your top 7s and you send them in and they play. Yeah, I mean, you could do a cup style or you could do just one tournament. But I think people would be excited to watch that. Just got to make it mean something.
I would watch that 100%. This is the kind of vertical integration, to use some buzzword, that we need to have in Ultimate. Everything is siloed. Nobody works together. It's brutal. I love the concept though. And
hey, if you're thinking about making World Games, boom, suddenly you got some tape to send. Hey, look at what I do in this format. Look at how I go. Coaches are suddenly like, oh, maybe I want to pay attention to this. Maybe I want to be at this. I want to be at there watching and taking stuff in so that we can prep for World Games.
It's a great idea. It's a chance to do the straight elim bracket too. I've talked about this for years.
Oh, we get to mess around with formats, with rules.
32 teams, single elim, all the way down. You can do it in a day, probably. It's maybe 2 guinea games, but 2 days, boom, boom. Stream like most of the quarters, all the semis and finals. It'd be amazing.
You know what else the 14 player 7-on-7 format is probably great for? Subs on timeouts. Like,
yes,
this is a great place to experiment with it.
Experimental rule tournament. 100%. 100%.
I mean, I think it's a little silly
right now, but like it's literally a good idea. Like somebody should do this. USAU could do this.
People are going to say, Charlie, you're the one who should do this, but we're not tournament organizers.
Maybe I'll do it.
But maybe
I'll do it. We'll create a scoring system. And when would we host this tournament? Probably like June. Like it's got to be in the preseason of club. I think you can't really get too much into the season.
I still think you go after the semi-pro leagues. I think they stand to gain a lot more from this than USA Ultimate.
They could do it themselves. It's just a little trickier to like line everything up, and not everybody plays in the pro leagues.
That is very true.
You want the best players, right?
That is
any
true.
of the good San Francisco players at the tournament because they don't play in the pro leagues.
What if Mixtape's just like, we're just sending our best 14. We're just sending 14. Come after us.
Yeah, I don't know how you like who gets to decide the teams and stuff. We got to think about the details. But
yeah, but I think this idea
I'm not against it. We'll host it. Let's do it. We'll do it in June. We'll have a point scoring system. We run it at club nationals or the club postseason. The top 16 or 32 locales get invites, and then there's some system by which somebody gets to be the determining captain or whatever and pick the teams, and then everybody sends their squad, and then you do it as like a preseason tournament for club in June.
Cash prize.
Incredible.
All Ultibucks.
Cash prize.
Actually, just Ultibucks prize.
All right. That is going to do it for this week's edition of Deep Look. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long. Send us an email, deeplook@ultiworld.com. Hit us up on Twitter @deeplookpod. And we'll talk to you next week.